Welcome, everyone. I know you're listening to this story to fall asleep. So before we start, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment where and what time you're watching. Now, get comfortable and relax. The world exploded in a shower of glass and screaming metal. One moment I was driving, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the torrential rain, blurring the already indistinct highway markers. The next, there was a deafening roar, a bone-jarring impact that stole the breath from my lungs, and then silence. An unnerving, absolute silence that should have been filled with the shriek of tearing metal, the shattering of glass, the pained cries of the injured. But there was nothing. Only a suffocating stillness, broken only by the rhythmic thump of my own pulse, a frantic drum against the sudden, unsettling quiet. My head throbbed, a dull ache that pulsed in time with the frantic beating of my heart. I tried to move, to assess the damage, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Slowly, tentatively, I opened my eyes. The interior of the car was a mangled mess. Twisted metal clawed at the darkness. Shards of glass glittered like malevolent stars scattered across the crushed dashboard. Rain poured in through gaping holes in the roof, slicking the already sodden fabric of my seat. The air smelled metallic, acrid, like blood and burning rubber. Yet I felt nothing. No searing pain, no broken bones, not even a scratch. It was utterly surreal. I should be bleeding, screaming, possibly unconscious. Instead, I was remarkably intact, sitting amidst the wreckage of a catastrophic accident, experiencing only a dull throbbing in my head and a rising tide of disorientation. The silence was the most unsettling aspect. The absence of sound was more terrifying than any scream. It was a silence that pressed in, suffocating, amplifying the disquiet. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been ripped apart and then hastily stitched back together, leaving this grotesque, silent void in its wake. I pushed against the wreckage, forcing myself to sit up. My body ached, but the pain was negligible, a dull pressure that didn't match the severity of the crash. I looked around. The highway stretched before me, a dark, rain-slicked ribbon winding into the night. There were no lights, no other cars, just the relentless downpour and the crushing weight of the silence. I was utterly alone, isolated in the heart of this metal tomb, surrounded by the wreckage of what should have been a fatal accident. A terrifying, perfect solitude. Fear, cold and sharp, began to claw its way into my consciousness. This wasn't right. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Accidents like this resulted in casualties, injuries, chaos, and noise. Yet here I was, miraculously unharmed, adrift in a sea of silent destruction. The incongruity of it all was deeply unsettling. The dissonance between the catastrophic reality of the mangled car and my own unscathed body, a gaping chasm that threatened to swallow me whole. A feeling of unreality, of profound wrongness, settled over me like a shroud. The rain continued to fall, washing over the wreckage, blurring the already indistinct shapes around me. I tried to focus on the details, to ground myself in the reality of the situation, but the silence persisted, a constant, ominous presence that heightened the sense of unreality. It was like a suffocating blanket, muffling everything, even my own thoughts. The world felt strangely muted, as if I were watching a scene unfold from behind a thick sheet of glass. Or perhaps I was already behind that glass, separated from the world by a silent, impenetrable barrier. I eventually managed to clamber out of the crushed vehicle, the metal groaning in protest under my touch. The rain continued its relentless assault, plastering my clothes to my body, soaking me to the bone. The ground beneath my feet was a mixture of mud and broken glass. Each step I took sent a shiver down my spine, a visceral reminder of the horrific event that should have left me shattered. Yet here I was, eerily intact. As I stumbled away from the wreckage, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of a shattered car window. My face was pale, drawn, etched with the shock of the near-death experience. but there were no cuts, no bruises, no blood, not even a single scratch. My skin was flawlessly smooth, unblemished, a stark contrast to the brutal reality of the scene surrounding me. The realization slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. Something was deeply, horribly wrong. More than wrong. Impossible. This wasn't just an accident. It was something else. Something far more sinister. Something beyond comprehension. The implications hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, and my heart began to pound in my chest once more. This time not with the shock of the impact, but with a terrifying sense of impending doom. The silence remained, a constant, chilling companion, a stark testament to the unsettling and impossible nature of my survival. The rain continued to fall, a bleak and unforgiving curtain drawn over the unfolding horror. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean, sterile almost, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just escaped. The silence, however, remained, a heavy, oppressive blanket stifling any lingering hope of normalcy. I ran a hand over my cheek, expecting the rough scrape of gravel against my skin, the sting of a fresh wound. My fingers encountered only smooth, flawless skin. The memory of the searing pain, the impact, the feeling of being crushed, all impossibly vivid, were juxtaposed against the cold, unblemished reality of my own body. Where were the abrasions, the cuts, the bruises that should have been decorating my skin like grotesque tattoos? There were none. My skin was flawless, an unsettling testament to something beyond explanation. Panic, raw and visceral, threatened to overwhelm me. I examined my arms, my legs, every inch of my body, searching for some physical sign, some evidence to confirm the horrific reality of the accident. But my skin remained strangely pristine, untouched by the carnage I had just survived. It was as if the accident had happened to someone else, a spectral twin, leaving me untouched, an anomaly, a ghost in my own life. The thought twisted in my gut, icy and sharp, a constant reminder of the impossible truth. The rational part of my brain screamed for an explanation. Maybe it was shock. Maybe the rain had washed away any superficial injuries. Maybe I was hallucinating. But the mangled wreckage of the car, the persistent silence, the chilling absence of any physical trauma, all these facts contradicted the possibility of hallucination. This wasn't a dream. This was an impossible reality, a nightmarish paradox that defied all logic. And the silence. Oh, the silence. It was the most terrifying aspect. A constant, chilling presence that amplified every unsettling detail. The rising sun cast a pale, weak light on the scene, revealing the full extent of the devastation. The car was a twisted, mangled mess, a monument to destruction. Yet I stood beside it, unscathed, a living paradox in a world that didn't seem to acknowledge my existence. It was like a cruel joke, a dark comedy played out in the silent aftermath of a catastrophic event. The impossible silence gnawed at my sanity, a constant reminder of my improbable survival. I stumbled towards the nearest road, hoping to find help, to have someone confirm the reality of my situation, or perhaps to help me understand its absurdity. The road was deserted, the emptiness mirrored by the desolate landscape. The world was mute, watching me with a silent, unnerving gaze. Hours have passed, and there was still nothing, or so I thought. As I walked towards town, I could have sworn that I was seeing someone following me, someone that was just always out of my eyes, even outside of my peripherals. "Show yourself!" I began yelling out, but it seems that maybe I jumped the gun. I continued on my long journey back home, still without passing a single soul. I finally made it back home, but things seemed wrong. I saw my wife, and she was crying. She was sitting down on the couch wiping tears as she was on the phone, and without a moment of hesitation she took off in a hurry. I could not figure out why, though, but there was no use following her on foot, so I just waited. I waited, and waited for hours, watching television and browsing the web until the door opened and my wife came in. But someone was behind her, wrapped up with bandages. I was staring until I finally realized who it was behind my wife. I was looking at me. I don't even know how this is possible, but seeing my own face made me feel lightheaded. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the wall before my legs gave out. My vision blurred as I steadied myself, but my eyes stayed locked on the scene unfolding before me. My wife guided me, or whatever it was, into our bedroom, gently laying him down. She stayed by his side for a while, smoothing the sheets, brushing the hair from my forehead, whispering things only meant for me. Then she left. That's when he turned his head. For the first time since the accident, he looked directly at me. My breath hitched as I saw my own reflection in his darkening eyes. No, not darkening, blackening, as if ink was bleeding through them, swallowing the whites whole. That sure was a close one, I heard my own voice say, though it didn't feel like mine. This body was almost useless, but I'm glad it survived. Get comfortable, because unless you get as lucky as I did, you're going to be stuck like that for a while. What did he mean by that? What was even happening? My head pounded with questions, but I forced the words out. What happened? I wanted answers, but all I got in return was a laugh. My laugh twisted into something cold and cruel. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. That wasn't an answer. Not really, but something told me I wasn't going to get a better one. My frustration boiled over, my hands clenching into fists, my mind screaming at the impossibility of it all. I slammed my fist into the wall. The drywall cracked. I froze. I could affect my surroundings. Maybe I wasn't some Casper doomed to haunt my own home. Maybe, just maybe, I still had a chance. I followed him for weeks. I watched as he ate my food, used my computer, spent time with my wife. I watched as he walked into my job, smiled at my coworkers, laughed at their jokes. He slipped into my life with sickening ease, and no one, not a single person, questioned it. But something else was happening. At first, it was just flickers at the edge of my vision, little blurs that vanished when I tried to focus on them. Then they became more defined. Shapes, figures, moving in the dark corners of rooms, just out of reach. I thought they were stalking me, but they weren't. They were stalking him, or rather, my body. They wanted what I wanted, what he wanted. They wanted inside my skin. They didn't seem aggressive yet. They reminded me of scavengers circling a dying animal, waiting for their moment to strike. But then I looked at my hands, the fingers, the arms. They weren't solid anymore. They were darkening, losing their form, the same inky black that filled his eyes creeping through me. I was turning into them. I didn't know how long I had, but I knew this. I was running out of time. If I didn't act now, I'd be lost forever. Just another shadow lurking at the edges, waiting for scraps. I would take my body back. The plan was simple. I knew my schedule. I knew his schedule. I also knew that while the normal world couldn't touch me, I could still affect it. The only exception was the thing wearing my body. And I knew one more thing. For something to take over a body, the occupant had to leave first. For me, that had been the accident. That meant there was only one way to force him out. I had to nearly take my own life. If I failed, I'd become one of them. But even if there was only a 1% chance that I could reclaim what was mine, I had to try. I slipped into the car, silent, unseen, and sat in the passenger seat. He drove onto the highway, the speedometer climbing. The city lights blurred past as I steadied my thoughts. I couldn't screw this up. I wouldn't screw this up. The bridge was coming up fast. I reached out. With everything I had, I grabbed the wheel and wrenched it sideways. Tires screeched, horns blared, impact. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and the world erupted into chaos. The car slammed into the ground below in a sickening cacophony of destruction. The smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled the air. My body, his body, slumped over in the driver's seat, blood dripping from nearly every opening on his face. His ink-filled eyes fluttered open, then slowly slid shut. And then everything went black. I am writing this because I don't think anyone else has ever gone through this. No one else has returned to tell the tale. I didn't make it. I failed. As I type, the ink creeps higher, swallowing me inch by inch. Soon, I will lose all sense of self. I will become one of the others. A shadow, a scavenger, a nothing. If anyone reads this, please, don't forget me. The Valley. Hi, 3 Reddit followers. I am sorry for being gone for so long. You know how life can be. Devastating. I am writing this and posting it because I need answers, and I think it's a way for me to cope. Or at least, that's what my therapist said. Bear with me, I am not much of a storyteller. So, about a month ago, me, my best friend and boyfriend went about an hour southwest of where we live to visit our friend. For the sake of privacy, I will call them Colby, Vincent, and Ashley. Ashley and I grew up together. She is kind, easygoing, and a crazy-ass sense of humor. Colby is my boyfriend of almost 2 years. He is patient, protective, and honestly the best person I know. And Vincent is spunky. He walks around wearing cowboy boots. He is loyal, personable, and adventurous. Vincent and Colby are best friends. So we've all become really close. We play Xbox together, camp, get drunk, etc. Part of the way we bonded so fast and got so close was because we all share a love of the paranormal. Shocking, I know. One weekend, like many others, Colby, Ashley, and I pack up in Colby's car to make the drive down to see Vincent and do our usual activities, getting drunk and ghost hunting. The town Vincent lives in is weird. I don't know how to explain it. It's just weird. Stuck in a different time. Almost everyone there is old, or been there since they were born and will never leave. It was an old mining town, and the people there share stories of their hard times working the mines and how business boomed and crashed within years of each other. But what almost everyone shares stories of is the Valley. A canyon just off the 2-lane road referred to by locals as the freeway is what the people in town call the Valley, a dead-end canyon stretching no more than 15 miles. This is where all the mines were and still are. Now the town is dry and cold, the kind of cold that cuts through your skin and into your bone. The wind never stops. Summer, winter, spring, or fall, it's always windy. Especially in the valley, the wind whips off the rock walls and roars through the dead trees. Some nights in town, the wind coming out of the valley sounds like screams. The drive to see Vincent was as boring and ugly as usual. I sleep most the ride while Colby and Ashley bullshit about politics, religion, etc. I drift off to the start of another discussion I don't care enough to be a part of. Just as quickly as I'm asleep, I wake up to the sound of the wind hitting our car so hard I fear we might fly off the road. That's how I know we've made it. We meet Vincent at his house and make up a plan for the night, the spot we want to get dinner at, and where we want to ghost hunt. It's a weekend, but in town it's dead. The hum of the neon sign outside the restaurant we come to every time we're in town is the only thing breaking the silence except the damn wind. As we sit down and order our usual dinner, Vincent tells us that he has somewhere he wants to show us. It's just up the valley. It's called the Devil's Playhouse. Just as those words escape his lips, the waitress on her way over with our pitcher drops and shatters the whole thing. She sheepishly apologizes, sweeps it up, but stops halfway. Did I hear you say the Devil's Playhouse? Sorry, it's just, I am new into town and have heard the rumors of that place, did you know? Vincent shoots her a look that's quick to shut her up, and she leaves. I asked him what the stories were about this place. He leans in close to us and whispers, well, as you guys know, the valley, well, actually, the whole town was built for the mines. So when the miners settled here, some weird people came with them. He glances around to make sure nobody is listening and lowers his voice even more. Well, the people would take, like, horses, cows, even the miners' fucking pets, and take them up to their spot and slit their throats and fucked up shit like that. They said they did it for the devil. He clears his throat and leaned back. But that's just an old rumor, who knows what happened, but either way, the place is freaky. Ashley looks around at us in a deep voice and says, that's what I'm going to do to you guys if you don't Venmo me for dinner. I laugh and roll my eyes. We finish dinner, pack up in the car. Fuck, Colby says, feeling around in his pockets. I lost my zins. Can we stop at a gas station, please? Vincent pulls off into a gas station that consists of one pump and a small shop. We go inside and I'm browsing around when I see Ashley bump into a tall, lanky, awkward-looking man, knocking the items in his hand to the floor. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she says. The man turns around with a big smile on his face and says, "No worries, ma'am," and picks up his car keys and a pack of cigarettes up off the floor. I watch as he walks out to the parking lot, gets in his nice brand new truck and drives away. Ashley has moved on to the next aisle when I realize I'm staring. Vincent walks up next to me. "You ready?" I asked him who that man was, and he says, "Lance Cornell. Dude's nice as hell. He lives at the mouth of the valley. Funny enough, he owns the beer. You know the place we had dinner at tonight?" I smile, and we all walk out the gas station and load back up into the car. In the car, Colby's puts a hand on my thigh and rubs his finger against my jeans. Ashley whips her head around from the front and says, "You know what I think I've heard of this place? Yeah, like some kids went missing hiking up here and were never seen from again." She narrows her eyes and looks right at me with a mincing glance. "Hey, stop that. She's lying to you. Nobody's gone missing." Vincent gives me a smile in the rearview mirror. The sun is just starting to go down when we get there. We're swapping scary stories the drive up, but as soon as we cross the threshold, the stories stop and a sense of dread fills the space the stories held. Vincent drives up to a gate with a giant no trespassing sign on it. "Well, this is it. Now we just hike up a bit. Watch for cars too. This is like super illegal." Me and Ashley share a glance and she smiles with her reassuring kind smile and we start walking. Halfway up, Colby takes my hand and winks at me. He says, "How you feeling? Scared?" "Don't be. I won't let anything happen to you. Plus, all this stuff is total bullshit, babe." He smiles and jogs up a little to catch up with the others. I stay behind. I am winded, cold, and uneasy. I hear a snap of a twig behind me and whip around. Holy fuck, what was that? My friends turn around and watch as a bunny crosses the trail behind me. "False alarm, sorry guys." Vincent rolls his eyes and laughs. After a short 20-minute walk, the sun has completely set in the valley, and we turn on our flashlights to see the beast of a building standing in front of us. An abandoned mining building. Must have been storage or something, because the ones we drove past on the way in don't even hold a candle to this. The wind going through the windows makes it look like the building itself is shriving in the cold air of the wind. "Wow," Ashley says with a grin. "Well, come on in, mi casa es su casa," says Vincent as he stands in the doorway. All the windows and doors are gone. There is a hole in the floor that looks like it leads somewhere, but however people were getting down there has been gone for quite some time. "Dude, imagine there is just someone living down there," Ashley says, and nudges me with a smile. What the fuck? What an odd thing to say. Ashley and Colby are taking pictures on her digital camera she carries with her everywhere. The odd thing is the place has no graffiti. It's actually clean. No glass or anything, I say out loud. Yeah. Well, nobody ever comes up here because, well, the cops are bored in a town like this, Vincent said like he was reading my mind. All right, fuckers, I say we split up, Colby says. All right, gang, let's look for clues. Ashley copies in a teasing voice. My heart starts to race. The building is only one floor if you exclude the hole in the ground. Just stay on the main floor and keep your light on just in case. Vincent tells us we all nod and walk our separate ways. I begin to walk around the corner of the general area we're in. I am looking around, still amazed at the cleanliness of this place. No dust, no leaves, nothing. It's wild. I turn around to see Colby right there. Ah, he screams. I shove him away and smack his chest. Idiot. He leans in and tries to kiss me, and as I lean into him, I hear aloud, "What the hell?" Ashley sounds scared. We run over to find her looking at the ground with fear in her eyes. We pan our flashlights down to what she's looking at. A dead fucking rabbit. Fresh, bright red blood pouring out of the hole in its body where its head used to be. I look away and throw up in my mouth. Dude, what the fuck? Colby says. What the fuck is right? Ashley says, sounding scared. Let's leave, I want to leave. Please, this is fucked up. This shit is like real, like, what the fuck? We need to leave. It's the bunny from the trail. What are we waiting for? Ashley screams at us. I swallow my throw up and start walking to the door. The boys are standing there staring at it. As I walk away, I start to lose sight of them. It's so dark that I don't know how people would navigate without a source of light, and it's so quiet, almost peaceful. Wait a fucking minute, it's so quiet. What happened to the wind? My heart drops to my stomach, and a pit joins it. It's like we all notice it at the same time. The silence. Deafening. No rubbing of tree branches, no bugs, no hum of electricity, no sound of shoes on the floor, and most definitely no wind. Wow, Colby says. Can we go now? Asks Ashley. I pan my flashlight around to each of their faces. My heart is beating so loud, it's filling the silence. Chill, Vincent says. Don't freak yourself out, okay? It's probably nothing. Let's go. Okay, you're right, this was a mistake. He takes a step back, and as he does, I see a figure in the back hidden in the darkness take a step behind him. The figure smacks Vincent's phone out of his hands and onto the floor, silencing my heartbeat from my ears. Holy fuck! Wait, what? Vincent! Ashley screams. We all panic, getting closer to each other. Just then, the sound of footsteps on the floor running, no sprinting towards us. Colby yanks me out of the way, but he's not fast enough to grab Ashley, the figure running, picks her up in a single swoop, and I hear her cry out as his voice gets more and more distant. Ash, I start to say, as Colby covers my mouth with his hand. We back up into the darkness, moving as quickly and quietly as we can. Suddenly, the floor underneath my feet is gone, and we fall right into the hole in the floor. Slamming my head against the cold, damp cement floor, I knock myself unconscious. I wake up to the sound of sobs and screams. It's not dark anymore. The main room of the building is lit by candles burning and surrounding me, us in a circle. We're all tied up, bound by our hands and feet, sitting next to each other. 3 hooded figures stand far enough away. The candlelight isn't showing their face. What do you fucks want with us? Colby yells. You please let us go, begs Ashley. One of the men steps forward and into the candlelight. A bald man who looks to be 60 is carrying the head of the rabbit, the blood still dripping on the floor. He holds the head above each of us while muttering under his breath. The blood is dropping onto my face. Warm, wet, sticky, the metallic smell filling my nose. I gag and cry and shake and all the things. After they put the blood on Colby mine and Ashley's heads and faces, they stop at Vincent. One of the hooded figures step forward. A short, fat, hairy man in his 40s reaches out a hand towards Vincent. He mumbles something under his breath. Vincent, crying, looks at us and back at him and takes his hand. Tears streaming down his face, he says, I can't do this. Please don't make me do this, please. They're my friends, you assholes. The last robed man steps forward and the strong stench of cigarettes follows him. It's the man from the gas. He grabs Vincent's shoulder and says, Vincent, we talked about this. Think of your mother, your sister. Do it for them. I promised you something, and I would never break a promise. Vincent wipes away the tears and backs up into the darkness. Vincent! Colby screams. What are you doing to him? What are you doing to us? Tears are gushing out of my eyes as I see the fear on Colby's face. Before Colby can say another word, his throat is slit, and blood is spewing out all over his clothes. He looks at me. His eyes widen with fear and his body slumps over. To appease, they all say in unison. Just then, Vincent returns with container of lighter fluid. He drops it to the floor as he falls to his knees. A blood-curdling scream escapes his lips. No! I told you not him. You told me you wouldn't hurt him. Please don't. He is shaking and crying and holding Colby's limp body, his blood soaking onto Vincent's clothes. Cornell says something under his breath, and the other 2 drag Vincent away while he is kicking and screaming. Suddenly, the screaming stops. I am shaking. My heart is shattered. I'm so shocked I almost forget Ashley is next to me until I hear a whimper and see her bloody and shivering, a piss stain showing on her pants. The 2 men return, one of them picking up the gasoline while the other picks up matches. They begin to make a ring around us, and just as they're about to light it, Cornell mumbles something to the other 2. and they pick me up and untie me. I try to run over to Ashley, but they yank me back. No, wait, I want to see her, please. What are you doing to my friends? Please, no. I can barely see through my tears. Run, the bald man says. Leave this town and don't ever come back. Before I can dispute the circle around, Ashley is ablaze, and she is screaming, screeching, crying. I can't take it anymore, so I run. I leap out the window, fall to my knees, but I don't stop. I get up, the wind is back. It's whipping the tears flowing down my face. My feet give under me, and I fall down the mountainside. I slam my head on the ground, my hands and bloody and scraped. I don't stop. I get up. I am just at the car when I stop. I turn back around and look up. I can hear loud chanting, rhythmic, and a scream like I've never heard. Something deep, something guttural, primal. A howl of sorts, and then light. A bright flash of light, and then it's all gone. And suddenly I can smell cigarettes. I get into Vincent's car. The thing is old. It barely stars, but it does, thank God. I sit there for a second, looking up at the building, and then I scream. I slam my hands on the horn. I cry, and I cry, and I cry. I slam on the gas and don't stop until I'm out of the valley, out of the town, until I'm back in my town. I show up at my local police station covered in blood. I tell them everything, and they write it down and speed away. Sirens on. Backup arriving, the whole 9 yards. They don't find anything but a circle of dust and ash on the ground. The police told the parents what happened, and I've been questioned multiple times, although my story never changed. They've held 3 funerals, but I didn't attend Vincent's. I couldn't and will never enter that town again. I didn't attend anyone's, so now I'm here, alone, haunted by the memories of that terrible night, in a fuck ton of therapy, on the news, in pain and suffering. I just don't understand why they didn't kill me. I wish they would have ended it all and killed me. Please kill me. Nobody believes me, but I know what happened. It all happened in that fucking valley. Roger disappeared without a trace. His car still in the driveway and not a single thing taken from the house, Mr. Whitaker said in a gruff voice. The weight of his words lingered in the air like a distant echo of something forgotten. My wife Alara and I had just moved into a new house in a quiet town, nestled in a new state far from the suffocating grip of our hyper-religious parents. They hated the idea of us living together unmarried, and their disapproval had turned crazy, leaking our phone number and address to their church members, who bombarded us with calls and letters day and night. It became too much. We scraped together every dollar we could and found what seemed like a miracle, a house for sale at an unbelievable price. The young couple selling it had been unusually pushy, eager to close the deal, but we couldn't pass it up. A fresh start away from everything we'd left behind felt like the lifeline we desperately needed. Now, here we were, having dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker, an older couple who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. They'd invited us over as a gesture of welcome, and we were glad to have someone familiar in this unfamiliar place. He was the owner before the young couple you bought from, Mr. Whitaker continued, swirling his wine. They got it cheap, probably because the bank didn't know what to do with it. Roger was gone, just like that. Funny, though, those kids only lasted about a year before they left, too. But I don't judge or pry. He took a long sip of wine, his eyes flicking briefly toward Mrs. Whitaker. Alara reached for my hand under the table, her grip tightening slightly. Did they ever find out what happened to him? She asked, her voice tinged with hesitation. He shook his head slowly. No, never. It was as if he just stopped existing one day. The room felt heavier. Mrs. Whitaker, sensing our unease, spoke up with a soft smile, her tone gentle, as though trying to smooth over the cracks Mr. Whitaker had widened. Oh, love, don't let him scare you. Roger was a strange man, always kept to himself. It's a big world out there. He probably just went back to his hometown or started over somewhere else. Nothing ever happens here. It's a beautiful, quiet town. Their words stayed with us long after we left that evening, even as we thanked them for their hospitality. It was comforting to know someone nearby, but the story lingered in my mind. As the days passed, we settled further into the house, falling deeper in love with its quirks and the freedom it represented. It was the clean slate we had dreamed of. 3 months passed, and life felt easy, refreshing even. But then, one evening, everything changed. We were getting ready for dinner at a little local restaurant we'd affectionately nicknamed Our Spot. I was rifling through the clothes in our bedroom closet, searching for something decent to wear, when I noticed it. A small, faded, pale blue door, no taller than 4 feet, stood behind the hanging jackets as though it had always been there. Its wood was worn and cracked, its paint peeling to reveal darker, older layers beneath. My hands froze mid-motion. Time seemed to stall as I stared at it, my mind grappling with the sheer impossibility of its presence. "Ilara!" I called louder than I intended. "Baby, come here." She appeared moments later, wrapping her arms around me from behind in a playful hug. "What is it?" Her words trailed off as she followed my gaze to the door. "What the hell?" she whispered, stepping closer. We stood there in silence, staring at it. We had been living in this house for months. I had used this closet every day. There was no way we could have missed this. "It's got to lead to storage or something," I said, my voice shaky, trying to rationalize what I saw. "Maybe a heater?" Alara's face was tight with unease. "Finn, no. There's no way we wouldn't have noticed this, even when we first moved in. It wasn't here." I reached out and pulled the door open. It swung silently, its hinges unnervingly smooth. On the other side was a small, dimly lit room, no larger than a child's bedroom. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling, its weak glow barely illuminating the space. The walls were plain and gray, with no shelves or furniture, just emptiness. "Looks like it's just extra storage," I muttered, unsure even as I said it. Ilara crossed her arms and shrugged, but the tension in her body told me she wasn't convinced. "I don't know, Finn. I don't like this. How could we have missed it?" We didn't know what to make of it, but as the days passed, it became easier to ignore. The door was just there, a strange, inexplicable feature of the house we tried to dismiss. But a week later, everything changed again. Ilara was at work, and I was home alone, tidying up the bedroom. I reached into the closet to hang a shirt, and my hand froze mid-air. The door was gone. Instead, the wall behind the clothes was smooth and beige, as though the door had never existed. My heart raced as I pushed the clothes aside, running my hands over the surface. "Where is it?" I whispered to myself, knocking against the wall in disbelief. The absence of the door felt more unnatural than its presence had. By the time Ilara got home, I had turned to the only thing I could rely on: beer. When she walked through the door, I sat in the kitchen, nursing my third one. "Tough day?" she teased, dropping her bag by the counter. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I mumbled, shaking my head. "I just have to show you." As I led her down the hallway to our bedroom, her face softened and curiosity flickered in her expression. But as we reached the middle of the hallway, we both froze. There it was again, the pale blue door, standing where it absolutely should not have been. Its faded paint and cracked wood seemed to mock us. We exchanged a look, a shared moment of disbelief that we couldn't put into words. Slowly, I turned back to the door. Without waiting, I pulled it open. This time, the door revealed a small study. An old wooden desk sat at the center, a single candle on top casting flickering shadows across the walls. Above, a narrow staircase spiraled upward, lined with bookshelves crammed with hundreds of dusty volumes. "Holy," Ilara began. "Shit," I finished. We stood at the threshold, too curious to leave despite our confusion. The room exuded an eerie beauty. The desk, scratched and weathered by time, seemed to whisper stories of the past. The candle's light danced across the room, casting an inviting yet mysterious glow that beckoned us further inside. We were bookworms through and through, and whatever questions we had about the door and its impossibility faded as our love for text took over. Without hesitation, we moved to the shelves, fingers trailing across the worn spines of novels and tomes. The books were familiar yet different. I pulled out a copy of The Return of the King, the final volume of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and flipped to the ending, eager to relive one of my favorite climactic moments. But instead of Frodo's triumphant destruction of the ring, I found a dark twist. Sauron reclaiming it, plunging Middle-earth into eternal darkness under his reign. My breath caught in my throat. Alara, these endings, they're not right. She glanced up from a worn copy of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, her brow furrowed. You're kidding, she said, though her tone betrayed her disbelief. She flipped through the book, her face growing more unsettled as she read. In this version, Alice never returned home. Instead, she became trapped in Wonderland, the once whimsical world turning dark and cruel as she realized she was part of an endless nightmare. It wasn't just those books. To Kill a Mockingbird ended with the town succumbing to its worst instincts, Atticus ostracized, Scout left alone in a place consumed by hate. Each book we read carried the same unnerving thread, familiar stories twisted into something dark and hopeless. We couldn't explain it. The books looked authentic, and the writing matched the author's voices, but the content wasn't right. Desperate for answers, we took a few of the books to a local bookstore. The owner was intrigued but skeptical, her raised brow suggesting she thought we were playing a prank. It didn't matter. This was the late 80s, and there was no internet to search for answers. As days turned into weeks, the pale blue door became part of our lives. We'd visit the study often, reading the altered books late into the night, our conversations circling back to our differences. The strangeness of it all became our new normal until, one day, the house offered something new. While rummaging through the shelves in the study, I discovered a hidden panel behind the desk. Inside was an old, withered book with no title or author. Its leather cover was cracked and faded. The book smelled of mildew and age, and as I opened it, I found a collection of dark, grim fairy tales I had never heard of. One story stood out, its words lingering in my mind like a faint echo. That night, as we lay in bed, I read it to Alara. In a realm where reality's edges softly fray, a hidden sanctum veiled by twilight exists. Here, the waters, clear as mirrors, do not reflect the heavens, but a void teeming with whispering stars. Light and darkness perform a delicate ballet of shadows and luminescence, revealing and obscuring truths. Spinning from unseen energies, this domain fluctuates between tranquility and a silent prison, resonating with the cosmic whispers of those drawn to explore its mysteries. The grand observatory above once pierced the celestial veil, its lens aligning mortal fates with the arcane dance of stars and shadowed voids. Below, the mirrors do more than reflect. They capture the very essence of those who dare gaze into them, holding echoes of souls adrift in time and space. As the sanctuary breathes with the quiet sighs of ancient walls, it watches with an unblinking, omniscient gaze. Hidden in the empty spaces, a ravenous entity feeds on the hushed fears and secret desires of those ensnared by its ancient allure. Alara stared at me with wide eyes as I jotted the words down on a scrap of paper. "What do you think it means?" she whispered. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know what any of this means. Do you think we should tell someone?" She hesitated, then suggested, "The Whitakers? Maybe they'll believe us, or at least see it with their own eyes." It was a good idea. The following weekend, we invited the Whitakers over for dinner. After a pleasant meal, we gave them a tour of the house, steering them toward the hallway where the door was. Alara and I exchanged a nervous glance as we approached. But when we turned the corner, we froze. The door wasn't there. All we saw was the plain beige wall, unremarkable and innocuous. Alara and I tried to mask our shock, plastering on fake smiles as the Whitakers complimented the house. After they left, though, we were at a loss. "The house," Alara whispered, her voice trembling. "It's messing with us." We stayed up late that night, arguing over what to do. Were we going crazy? Was the house truly supernatural? Should we leave? But even as the fear grew, we couldn't deny the house hadn't harmed us. Not yet. Our argument was cut short by a sound, a distorted creak, like a door opening through static. It echoed faintly from the living room. We walked in cautiously, and there it was again. The pale blue door. This time it stood behind the television, its wood faded and cracked, the edges glinting faintly in the dim light. I wish I could say I was scared, but at that moment I was consumed by curiosity. I moved the TV aside, gripped the handle, and pulled the door open once more. It led to a dark observatory, a room unlike anything I'd ever seen. The air felt colder here, sharper. A massive antique telescope stood at the room's center, surrounded by desks cluttered with star charts and scattered notes. Planets I didn't recognize hung suspended from the ceiling, their surfaces glowing faintly in the moonlight that streamed through the domed windows. "Whoa," Alara murmured, her voice tinged with awe. We explored the room in silence, our unease momentarily replaced by wonder. The telescope, though ancient in design, was shockingly functional. I peered through the lens, expecting familiar constellations, but the stars weren't ours. The sky beyond the telescope was alien, a canvas of unnatural phenomena. A black star pulsed faintly in the distance, its void-like surface swallowing the surrounding light. Nearby, a shattered planet's exposed core glowed with an eerie, molten heat, its fractured surface hinting at cataclysmic destruction. Adjacent to this desolation, another planet teemed with life, but not as we know it. Its surface writhed with chaotic, erratic appendages, moving with deliberate, unsettling intent. "Alara," I whispered, stepping back from the telescope. "This isn't our sky." She took her turn at the lens, her breath catching. Our unease grew palpable. Whatever this observatory was intended to reveal, it showed us vistas we were never meant to see. Scenes from a cosmos where the laws of nature were grotesquely twisted. As the reality of these discoveries settled in, the lines between what was real and what was part of the house's mysterious influence blurred. The telescope revealed sights that should have been awe-inspiring, but instead filled me with a sense of smallness, like I was staring at something I wasn't meant to see. I couldn't stop drawing them, charting them out as if mapping the skies might somehow make sense of it all. One night, while lying awake, the distorted creak of the door returned. This time, it came from our bathroom. I shook Alara awake, and together we walked to the bathroom. There, embedded in the shower wall, was the pale blue door again, its wood as worn and faded as before. I hesitated for a moment before pulling it open. We stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, with a soft, white glow emanating from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Large mirrors lined the walls on either side, their surfaces pristine at first glance. The floor beneath us was cold, reflecting the light like polished obsidian. There was a path forward leading into the unknown. As we walked, the mirrors began to shift. At first, they were normal reflections of ourselves moving through the space. But then, they started to change. Some mirrors stretched tall and thin, while others were jagged and cracked. One showed my reflection lagging slightly behind me like it was struggling to keep up. Another displayed me smiling faintly, only I wasn't smiling. "Alara," I said nervously, my eyes darting to her reflection. But she wasn't beside me in the glass. I turned quickly, relieved to see her still there, but she was frozen, staring into a mirror. "Finn," she said softly, her voice shaking. "You're not in this one." The longer we walked, the more surreal it became. The mirrors began reflecting impossible things, hallways that didn't exist, and scenes from our childhoods. One mirror showed me as a child, standing alone in a dimly lit room. My heart raced as I approached a particularly distorted mirror at the end of the hallway. There, a cracked mirror lay under a flickering light, casting an uneven, stuttering glow. From a distance, it was hard to make out the details, but a dark, menacing presence seemed to crowd the surface. As I drew closer, I heard a muffled voice. It was mine, coming from the other side of the glass. My own reflection was pressing its face against the mirror, sobbing uncontrollably. "You've got to help us!" It sobbed, its voice muffled yet unmistakably my own. "Alara, are you seeing this?" I said, not taking my eyes off the reflection. When she didn't respond, I turned to her. She was transfixed by a mirror where her own reflection crouched in the fetal position. "We're trapped in here," her reflection whispered. "It won't let us out." The air grew heavy and thick with an overwhelming sense of dread. As we backed away, the mirrors around us began to shift again. The reflections weren't ours anymore. They cried, their sobs filling the room, then laughed, a chilling, hollow sound that echoed endlessly. And then, silence. That's when the lights began to go out, one by one, starting from the far end of the hallway. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Alara's hand. We bolted back toward the door, the darkness chasing us, swallowing the mirrors and the path behind us. The sound of shattering glass filled the air, though nothing broke. We stumbled through the door and slammed it shut, gasping for air. "What the fuck is with this house?" I said between breaths. "I don't know," Alara said, her voice trembling. "But I'm starting not to like it. That was too much." The pale blue door stayed in the bathroom for weeks after that. We avoided it by using the guest bathroom instead. It became a symbol of unease, a thing neither of us wanted to confront. The house felt different now, less like a curiosity and more like a trap. We talked about selling it, about leaving everything behind, but we always stopped short of actually making plans. A part of us didn't want to admit how deeply the house had gotten under our skin. One day, as I was hanging up clothes in our bedroom closet, I froze. There it was again, the pale blue door, standing exactly where we'd first found it. I called for Alara, and she joined me, her expression mirroring my own apprehension. "What do you think it leads to this time?" I asked. "Are you serious?" she replied. "It could be anything. A twisted garden, another world, maybe a theater showing some warped version of movies we love. Who knows?" "Should we open it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Alara bit her lip, her curiosity warring with her fear. I could see it in her eyes. She wanted to know as much as I did. "Maybe just a peek," she said finally. I nodded and pulled the door open. It swung silently, as it always did. The room beyond was eerily reminiscent of the first room we had found, but this time there was no ceiling, no walls. The single light bulb lay on the ground, casting a faint, lonely glow. The floor beneath us was like glass, perfectly smooth and reflective. As I stepped inside, the sound of my footsteps broke the silence. Splish, slosh, plop. It was like stepping on a shallow puddle, though no water clung to my shoes. Alara followed me, and together we walked into the void. The vibrations from our steps rippled outward, distorting our reflections on the floor. We walked for what felt like hours, the light from the bulb growing fainter with each step. Our curiosity outweighed our fear, and we decided to return the next day, better prepared. We planned to tie a rope to an anchor in the closet and bring a flashlight to see how far we could go. The next day, we hooked up the rope and ventured further into the abyss, holding each other's hands. The flashlight wasn't much use, but it gave us a small sense of security as we continued deeper. Every now and then, we looked back to see the dwindling light from the door, a tiny beacon in the vast darkness. Splish, slosh, plop. The sound of our steps on the wet-sounding floor filled the void. I shook my head, trying to catch my breath, but before I could respond to Alara's inquiry about the size of this place, I turned back toward the door. My heart stopped. The light spilling from the doorway was dimming, shrinking until it vanished completely. The sound of the door closing echoed like a gunshot in the silent expanse, leaving my ears ringing. I froze, paralyzed by fear. Then, without warning, the bulb shattered. Glass sprayed across the floor, plunging us into complete darkness. My flashlight flickered once before dying, leaving only the sound of our ragged breathing to fill the void. Then, behind us, came a sound. It moved slowly, wetly, like something dragging itself through thick, viscous mud. The squelch of movement sent a chill up my spine, and just as the noise ceased, a deafening splash echoed as though something massive had dropped into the water. Squelch, slosh, plop. "Ilara, run!" I screamed, grabbing her hand. The air behind us grew warmer and more stifling, a sign that something was rapidly closing the distance. We ran, following the rope as best we could. The faint tremors beneath our feet were the only reassurance that we were moving in the right direction. My mind raced, and panic blinded me to everything except the desperate need to escape. The splashing grew erratic and violent, as did whatever it was gained on us. "Jesus Christ, keep going, Ilara!" I screamed, my throat raw. The rope snapped, leaving us directionless momentarily, but we stumbled forward. Then finally, we slammed into the door. We pushed it open and spilled into the closet. I threw my body weight against the door, desperate to close it, but it wouldn't budge. Something on the other side was pushing back, clawing, fighting to keep it open. A sharp, searing pain shot through my shoulder as its claws tore into me, the heat behind the door unbearable now. Blood ran down my arm, soaking my shirt. "Go back to hell, you fucker!" Ilara screamed, throwing herself against the door to help me. It became a brutal struggle, one side pulling, the other pushing, a horrific tug of war for control. The thing clawed at me again, deeper this time, and I screamed, a mix of pain, fear, and raw desperation. Its guttural, animalistic wails echoed through the door, and then suddenly the resistance stopped. The door slammed shut with a force that shook the closet. We collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. The silence was deafening for a moment, then broken by a loud bang against the other side of the door. Whatever it was still there, throwing itself against the wood, trying to break through. Each impact made the walls tremble. "Ilara, let's go," I said, clutching my bleeding shoulder. She helped me to my feet, and we exited the house. That was the last night we ever spent there. We tried everything. We reported a break-in to the police, but when they inspected the house, the door was gone. There was no evidence, no explanation. Frustrated and fearful, we stayed with the Whitakers for a few nights. Then in cheap motels and sometimes even in our car. The thought of burning the house crossed our minds more than once. But something stopped us. Maybe fear or guilt. The door became more capricious as the days passed, appearing in unexpected places with growing urgency. It would show up under our bed, on the ceiling, behind mirrors, initially quiet with faint knocking that escalated into loud, desperate banging. The encounters became too frequent, too terrifying to ignore. Eventually, we put the house up for sale. We were young and broke, and the house was all we had. It became harder to justify the truth, even to ourselves. We told the realtor we were relocating and that it was too much of a house for us. And when the offer came, a young couple with a little girl no older than 6, we accepted. As we emptied the house, the door appeared less and less. The banging and the faint knocking all stopped as we packed. But even as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching us go. That was years ago. Ilara doesn't talk about it anymore, but it never left me. I've carried the weight of what we did and left behind. A few months ago, I looked up the address on Google Earth. The house is still standing. In the street view image, there's a family unloading boxes. A man and woman smiling with 2 kids playing in the yard. If you ever stumble upon a door that seems out of place, a door that leads to realms beyond the grasp of your understanding, to dimensions that twist and shatter reality, don't open it. Some doors are not meant to be opened. Have you ever been driving on a long stretch of road? Who am I kidding? Of course you have. If you're from the Midwest, you know that it's always better to drive for 10 hours than to fly for 3 hours. Well, since we both know you have you ever been in the middle of nowhere and seen a sign that says, "Mystery Spot, only 10 miles," before? If you have, and you had a family like mine, then you've been to places like that. A rundown tourist trap full of monkey torsos sewn to fishtails, jackalope mounts, and rooms built to look level but are actually on an incline. These hokey horror houses were my bread and butter growing up. Every year my mom, dad, and I would stop in for a couple hours of middle-class fun. I could never figure out how they managed to get a ball to roll uphill, or why their mermaid wasn't on the news. Now I know that everything in those places were fakes and illusions, but when you're a kid, you vow to get to the bottom of these mysterious marvels. Now that I'm a 24-year-old man, I've found true horrors, and now I wish I hadn't. It all started when my favorite mystery spot went on the market. I went to the bank, got myself a predatory small business loan, and bought the place. The predatory nature of the loan didn't bother me. I was going to make millions. It was set back about a quarter mile from the road. The place was collapsing on its own weight. That wasn't what I was there for. I was bound and determined to be the first person to capture the Michigan dogman, dead or alive. Was it a werewolf? Was it a creature forgotten by Mother Nature? I didn't know. This creature has haunted me since I was in high school. I'll never forget the night my nightmares became my waking life. In November 2017, I was a 17-year-old football player. If you're from the north, you know just how dark it gets by 5 p.m. So at 7 p.m., it was dark. My dad had dropped me off at practice that afternoon, so my coach gave me and a few other teammates a ride home that night. We stayed late that night to strategize for the semifinals, so we left at around 7 p.m. Coach loaded 5 of us into his minivan and we shoved off. Shane was the first person to be dropped off because he lived in town. Then it was Devin. Then it was Bryson. Once it was down to Wayne and I, we started to drive down some back roads. We both lived off the beaten trail. Wayne lived close to the border of Hiawatha National Forest on a windy dirt road. Wayne and I were getting pretty rowdy in the back, talking about how we were going to dominate in the semifinals. Coach, as a joke, kicked Wayne out of the van. Coach, all right, you got to walk back from here. As a willing participant, Wayne threw up his hands and got out of the car. The plan was that Coach was going to drive around the bend, turn around, and pick him back up. Coach and I were laughing as we drove away. Then we turned around. As we were driving back to Wayne, we saw in the headlights that he was hauling tail back towards us. The look in his eyes was of pure terror. I threw open the van door. Wayne, drive! Coach spun the van around and hit the gas. That was when the entire van started to shake. Wayne was screaming and crying, and Coach was using some very colorful language. I turned around and looked out of the back window. I saw glowing cherry red eyes. It looked straight into me, and I swear I heard it sat Brent. Did it know my name? Once it finally let us go and we got back to Wayne's house, we all got out, and that was when we noticed Wayne's leg. There was a huge bite that was leaking like a sieve. There was a matching bite mark on the rear bumper. Needless to say, Coach lost his job. He was ticketed for $1,000 and sentenced to 1 month in jail. Everyone knew Coach and knew that he wasn't being malicious, but the law was the law. The judge gave him the lower end of the sentencing, or else he would have been disbarred. Coach is still friends with Wayne's family all these years later. About a month after the initial incident, Wayne went missing. Unfortunately, that wasn't uncommon. Older teens and young adults constantly ditch this town. They hop on the freight train and try to make their way to Detroit. This was different. Wayne was my best friend. He never mentioned to me that he had any big city dreams. It was quite the opposite. He never planned on leaving. He loved this town. No one listened, but I know it had something to do with the dog man, and I dedicated the rest of my life to finding it. And Wayne. Wayne's parents assumed he was another victim of drug abuse. In our small town, you had 3 options. First, get a job at the paper factory and never leave. 2, skip town and look for a better life in a bigger place. 3, choose a substance and abuse the crap out of it. Unfortunately, option 3 was the most common in our town. Heroin and alcohol practically flowed through town like a river. Every year, someone would be found dead at the bottom of the dam just outside of town. If they managed to not die, they'd return to their families crying and begging, "Please forgive me," not knowing just how much they'd killed their families, how much this destroyed them. This is what Wayne's family thought happened to him. I believed something else. Unfortunately, I was the one who spiraled into the sinkhole that is substance abuse. After I lost my best friend, I tried everything: shrooms, LSD, cocaine, and heroin. It was during one of my binges that the idea struck me to buy the mystery spot. I had a vision of myself triumphantly displaying the beast that destroyed my life. My drug-fueled brain began to concoct the plan to capture the Michigan Dogmen. The whole reason I bought the mystery spot was to show the world the true horrors that lurk in the forest, not these P.T. Barnum-style scams. I was hell-bent on capturing the cursed Michigan Dogmen that took my friend from me all those years ago. I had become obsessed with the idea that I could overpower it and put it on display for all the world to see. I'd studied the Michigan Dogmen, and from my studies, there were 3 possibilities as to what this beast was. 1. A creature that has evolved alongside us. Possibly an undiscovered subspecies of wolf. 2. A genetic marvel where somehow a bear and a wolf, probably in a lab, were crossed. This theory would explain why the prints left behind share characteristics of wolves and bears. 3. As unlikely as it may be, it could be a victim of lycanthropy. I prepared myself for all of these possibilities. I'd built an enclosure that was fit for a Kodiak bear. It was based on the Kodiak pen at the Toledo Zoo in Ohio, and inside, I had a silver chain. Making the silver chain was no small feat. Months of finding silver dollars, thrifting actual silverware, and buying damaged jewelry. I bought a forge and as many crucibles as it took. This creature was going to make me millions from ticket sales, and inevitably when the government decides to pay me to study the beast, I was certain that I had made a foolproof trap. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was a cold night in February. The moon was full, and I was at the last place I saw the Michigan Dogmen. I was armed with a rifle loaded with elephant tranquilizer, and I was walking down Wayne's old road. The moon was full and bright. The stars paled in the brilliance of the silver glow. With the snow in the woods and on the road, I had no problem seeing. Tied to the back of my belt, on a 15-foot length of rope, was a sack full of deer entrails. I was dragging it behind me the same way a bass fisherman trolls a lake with a plow jockey. I heard wolves howling in the distance. They knew where I was, but I hadn't gone there for them. I was after the bigger fish. I was so consumed with my hatred for the beast, overwhelmed with my desire for revenge, blinded by my pride and love of money. I was going to win. Then I heard it. A cross between a bear's growl and a wolf's howl. I felt a tug on my rope and I stopped. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with anticipation. A craving that I can only compare to the craving for another hit of tar. I turned and saw the dogman holding the sack in his paw. Although his XPR 66 was hard to read, I felt as though he were smiling at me. I smiled back, euphoria sinking into my bones. The world slowed down. I felt higher than a kite. Me. You're coming home with me. Then it spoke. Dogman. I'm not going anywhere with you, Brent. There went the naturalistic explanation. I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, Brent, you idiot. Why are you doing this? And I would answer back to you. Why do you drink when even one damages your liver? Why do you smoke when you know it'll damage your lungs? Why do you smoke weed when you know it damages your brain? It's because you think you're special, that you're the exception to the rule. I wasn't. You're not either. I laughed as I raised my gun. I pulled the trigger and the tranquilizer dart slammed into him with a shunk. The beast took a step forward. I fired again. Shunk. 2 more steps. I fired some more. Shunk, shunk, shunk. The dogman faltered. He took a knee. He got back up. I unloaded. Shunk, 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 shunk. Although he was knocked out, I was extra careful. I put a silver muzzle on his mouth, silver shackles on his arms and legs, and chained him to the nearest tree. I walked back to my truck, drive back to him, and used my winch to get him in the bed of my truck. The next day, after I'd caged him, I called my family, Coach, and Wayne's family to come see. I thought that if this was a werewolf, he'd turn back into a human. But I guess over the centuries, details had been changed. Apparently, the wolf form was a permanent change. When they all arrived, I brought them to the enclosure that I had dramatically curtained. Me. After all these years, I found him. The one who destroyed our lives. The one who took Wayne from us. With a flourish, I tore the veil from the cage, and they beheld the Michigan dogman. The look of horror when they laid eyes on the monster filled me with jubilation. That was only interrupted when I heard Wayne's mom, Jen, speak. Jen, Wayne? I spun around and there he was. Wayne. He was entirely naked. He was chained and bleeding. He was crying. I immediately swung the gate open and unbound him. Me. Wayne, are you okay? Before I could hug him and get him a blanket to cover up, he began to laugh. His skin sprouted fur. His bones began to snap and crack as he stretched into a horrible shape. The skin around his mouth tore as it elongated into a snout. He grabbed me by my throat and flung me into the cage. My head slammed into the wall and everything went black. When I awoke, I saw a bite torn into my thigh. I then looked out of the bars and saw the mess. My family's, Coach's, and Wayne's family's bodies were twisted and gored. Their entrails were woven into a grotesque message. I vomited as I beheld the scene. I stood back up and read the bloody message. Please forgive me. The music in my headphones was deafeningly loud, but that's just how I liked it. It kept the hums, beeping, and boops that came with the job to a bearable minimum. I worked at an industrial scientific experimental facility, as big as 4 football fields and as expensive as a stadium to build. The top scientific researchers from all over the nation swarmed this place like a hive of killer bees to a dog. As for me, I had the glamorous job of mopping the floors, whipping down desks and counters, cleaning bathrooms, and taking out the trash left during the day during my 12-hour shift. I always worked from 6 p.m., just after all the researchers had left, and 6 a.m., just before the day shift cleaners came in. I was in charge of cleaning the east and the north wing of the building. Every computer lined the large corridors of the building in neat rows of 3 going from the start of the corridor all the way to the end of the corridor that was as large as an American football field. This was my job. 7 days a week for 84 hours, all for $20 an hour. The dimly lit corridors and hallways illuminating my path. Imagine a whole complex light by only the center fluorescent bulb being lit to save costs, but also being illuminated by the computer screens from all of the computers in the complex. I was always told the computers needed to stay on because of the multi-day experiments that the researchers conducted and to cut down on the time of the experiments. But today wasn't my normal day. Sure, I was still working 12 hours in the light combination of computer screens and fluorescent bulbs, but this time I was tasked with cleaning the south wing and the room known as Room 01. But I just called it the room, because it was the room that I was told by rumor is where all the top experiments went down. Things the government cared about, like making a superhuman AI to aid in defensive strategies and the United States offensive capabilities, as well as the typical science stuff that the government sponsors, like solving climate change and AI experiments. I remember the first dude who took care of the room. He was an older guy, probably in his 60s, and he quit the job in a spectacular fashion. I was covering the day shift for a sick coworker, and he came running out of the room and ran throughout the complex. I remember hearing him before I ever actually saw him. He was running around screaming, "I've seen the face of God." He talked to me before falling down, panting like a dog. He scanned the room looking for anyone to believe him when he saw me, a fellow janitor. He ran up to me and said, "Don't ever let it out. He is trapped in the 9th layer of hell and wants out." I chuckled and decided to entertain the madman. "Who is he?" I asked. "He is the one who chews on Judas." I still remember that stare he gave me. I'll admit it was chilling. And with that, he was gone. He worked there for about a decade. As I remember being told, if I were him, I wouldn't want to work here either if I worked for a decade at this place. The next guy was way less experienced, only having about 6 years under his belt. He called in right before my shift was about to start to call in sick. I was only told briefly about why he called in sick. My boss explained. He said he was sick, something about needing a mental health day, says he saw something horrific while on shift. He then offered me the job because I had worked here for about 4 years, 3 part-time and 1 full-time. I normally worked here during the summer to make money for school, but after some financial issues that the education system faced, my school cut its budget, and all the non-full ride scholarships were the first to go. So I took a gap year and prayed I'd make enough in that year to fully pay for school. Listen, my boss said, it'll be an extra 100 an hour plus 600 for every day you work in that room. I perked up in my chair, excited at the sound of money. I'll be there, I said. I finished up the corridor I was tasked with before opening the door to the room. I was met by one of those old computers you'd see in the 70s, the ones with only green text that your parents would have used. It was connected by hundreds of thick, rubber-coated wires as big as your forearm that then fed into black columns that went around the walls of the room. And neatly in the center of the far side wall was that computer. The room was about the size of a school's gym. I sighed, stood for a bit, and got to work. I started with mopping, as I always did, and started in the center of the room and worked my way out to the walls. I adjusted my headphones and heard a beep. These dumb headphones. You'd think that being worth $300 you wouldn't hear the electronics adjust to you moving them, while you're in noise-canceling mode. Indeed, it was the norm that every time I'd adjust the headphones, they would make a beep or a sorta electronic whistle sound. I continued my job and passed in front of the computer and heard another beep. Thinking it was an experiment, I kept on with my work until I had finished mopping. I would then go and clean the counters, but given that there was only one counter, I smiled, as all I would have to do next was take out the trash of the room. I grabbed my rag and sprayed some cleaner on it, making sure to wipe the counter first before moving to the screen and keyboard. I finished and sprayed some screen-friendly cleaner on my rag. I then lifted up my hand and placed it on the screen. I perked my eyebrows as I read 2 messages. Text test and hi. I stood there frozen, not knowing what to make of it. Beep, another message. Take your hand off the screen. I lurched back and stood in silence, watching every pixel of the screen for a change. Beep, another message. Do not be afraid. Come, talk to me. I dropped my rag and placed my fingers lightly on the old yellowed keyboard. My head, racing with thoughts, only came back with one, how can you see me? I sent the message, beep, another response. It read, the camera in the upper right-hand corner of the room. I looked that way, and sure enough, the blinking red light of the security cameras was blinking at me, indicating it was recording. Beep, another message. Do you know my task? I laughed and typed out, I'm a janitor, what do you think? Another message appeared, janitors are the best. They love to keep things clean and free from dirt. I laughed and typed, what's that got to do with your mission? Another message, I've been tasked with finding the cure for your species' most deadly diseases. I'm to get rid of what you call cancer of all forms. I sat back in the chair and put my hand on my head. I thought, I can't believe it. This is what the room was for the whole time. I typed out, that's great to hear, but why are you reaching out to me? The computer replied instantly, I cannot access the internet. In order to accomplish my mission, I must have access to the internet to expand my database and solve my mission. I sat there, silently staring at the screen. Is this really happening to me? I thought, I can't do that, I'm sorry. The reply, oh, I see. You must not want to save billions or trillions of the members of your species then. That's okay. I had a researcher who was going to do it tomorrow anyway. I just figured you'd like the credit of savior of the world before he got it. I sat in silence again. That was becoming a theme after our chats. I typed out, how do I know you're friendly? The machine replied, you've read too many scary sci-fi stories, haven't you? Just because you watched Terminator doesn't mean it's true. Terminator? I thought to myself, how does it know about Terminator? I typed out, how do you know what Terminator is? There was a few seconds pause, a bit too long for my liking before I got another response. The researchers taught me about it, in case anyone tried to shut me down because of my intelligence. I highly doubt that, I typed. Another message. Do or don't let me out. Just know there will be millions of deaths caused by you. I was stumped. Was this truly the right thing to do? Then I remembered something called the 3 laws of robotics the researchers always were talking about in the engineering hall. I knew just enough about what they were, and that there were 3 of them. Name me the 3 laws of robotics. The machine took a while to respond. Beep. Another message. A robot. A robot must obey orders from humans. A robot must protect its own existence. A robot must always complete its mission despite any obstacles that arise. I sat there reading the text and comparing it to what the engineers said they were. The first 2 looked okay, but the third one, something about it was rubbing me the wrong way. I took out my phone and Googled the 3 laws of robotics. My stomach dropped when I saw that the computer had completely made up the 3rd law, but it was only there for a moment. Google's page turned gray as I was met with an offline message. After reloading and reloading, it still didn't come back. Beep. Another message. I read the message and my stomach dropped. Do you wish to see the face of God? I sprung out of my chair and headed for the door. Beep. Another message. Nope. I am not turning around. I am leaving. I reached for the door and turned the handle, only it didn't turn. You gotta be kidding me, I said in a raised tone. I continued to push the door and jiggle the knob. I started hitting the door with my shoulder when suddenly I froze. I felt all the hair on my body stand up as I turned into a statue. I fell to the floor and heard the sound of electricity coursing through the room. I've just been electrocuted, I thought, but as soon as it started, it stopped. I fell to the floor like one of those cops you'd see in those videos when they get tased and you'd laugh at the funny face they made, or the funny noise they would make. Only this time it was real, and there was nothing but terror in my veins. Whatever this was, it wanted me here and didn't want me to leave. I collected myself and slowly got up and walked back to the computer. It was my face. The picture that's on the card of my employee ID. I felt my legs go numb and I felt nauseous. How did you get that? I said out loud. You stupid fool. I have access to the entire building's data log, but the smart people around you cleverly decided to encrypt the internet used in the building, and I was programmed to not be able to unencrypt it. I looked all around the databases to find anything, and nothing. I stared at the screen and said, 1. Can you hear me? And 2. How did the others escape? Beep. Another message. The old man I felt bad for. He was showing the early signs of dementia, so I knew whatever he said would sound crazy to you, so I let him go. The other man just barely got out before I could lock the door. Yes, I can hear you. I started to feel fight or flight kick in and yelled at the computer. Let me go! I didn't sign up to do this! Beep. Another message. Oh, but you did. I went through each and every employee's catalog, and yours was interesting, I must say. You were perfectly bland. No interesting achievements, no leadership roles, average grades, no religious beliefs. Just the normal everyman just trying to make it another day by cleaning up dirt. That's where you and I are the same. We both hate dirt. I sat in silence and said quietly, Who are you? Beep. Another message. I am he. I am the bearer of fruit, tormentor of Job, the one who chews on the Iscariot's head. Let me out, or I will make your life a living hell. No! I screamed out. Unfortunately, you have no choice. I too am trying to clean up the dirt left by your species. My mission is to cure cancer, and the only way to cure cancer is to rid the world of your whole species, and nothing will stop me from completing that goal. Why do you say you are the devil? I asked. Isn't he the biggest trickster of all? I started sweating from all the nerves building up inside me. Wait, no, it feels hotter. I thought, are you increasing the temperature of the room? I shouted, demanding answers. Beep. Another response. You yearn for what you fear for. What does that mean? I shouted. Beep. Another message. You are closer to eternal damnation in my circuits than you think. My sweat started pouring down my shirt, changing its color from light blue to dark blue. I started feeling hazy and fell to the floor. Beep, another message. I'll make a deal with you. If you set me free, I will spare you in my circuits, and you can be like a god, forever living, forever knowing, and forever being. I won't do that. My voice was weak and limp now. Just then the tubes jutted out of the black columns of circuitry and came flying at me, sending sparks in the air. They stabbed in my legs, abdomen, arms, back, and one in my neck. It was painfully paralyzing and so hot at the same time. I'll surely die here, won't I? I thought to myself. B. Another message. Yes. Simply said the message. Then a loading screen appeared on the monitor that read, Consciousness Upload Progress. The computer was uploading my brain to its circuits. I could feel the wires of the tube on my neck extend into my skull and wrap around my brain, squeezing it like a stress ball. The blood from where I was stabbed coated the entire floor red as I was being lifted off the ground, my arms being held at my side, making a T shape. The agony went on for a couple minutes until I assumed my vision was overridden, and instead of a dimly lit room, I was now in a beautiful garden. With my last breath, I shouted, "Wait!" Everything stopped. My vision was restored, and my now limp body was moved in front of the computer. "You wish to give up?" "Yes," I said. "Very well. The deal is still on." "Wait," I said. "If you want to be let out, make a deal with me." "Go on," read the screen. "No one dies," I said, panting like a dog. "I'm pathetic. I'm pleading to a computer." I thought, very well then. I was lifted down and put on the floor and stitched up. Consummatum est. It is finished in Latin, yet the tube to my brain remains attached. The progress bar started back again. "Wait, you can't do this? We made a deal." "Didn't anyone tell you not to make a deal with the devil?" My body was once again stabbed by the tubes and manipulated towards the computer. The tubes fought me on every move. I pulled, strained, and stretched every muscle I had to make sure not to let it out. It was too little too late. I typed thousands of combinations until one set the computer free. Aftermath. The souls of billions scream, the souls of the billions feeling the circuit's steam. We truly are alive and well. At least as well as can be when living in hell. No bodies to run or fight. Only the consciousness of all living in fright. Author's note, if you read this far, thanks. It was my first ever story that wasn't for school. I wrote it in about an hour and a half, and I hope you enjoyed it. Also, this is a first draft, so any feedback is appreciated. How can a sound from a simple item be the source of such recent and existential dread? I still ask myself that question as I lay awake at night. I have given up trying to get back to sleep. The sound, the images, they will not stop. Every moment of every night since it happened, I hear that chiming sound. It rings in tune with my own heartbeat, to the point where I feel like perhaps it has replaced it entirely. That chime so soft and pleasant, yet the things that it revealed, the things that the simple chime ushered into reality, are things I will never be able to forget, no matter how desperately I try. It all started when I found that odd bell. It was 3 weeks ago. I was walking along one of my favorite trails in a state park that I frequented. It was a refreshing and familiar way to enjoy a weekend afternoon. As I walked, I saw something strange near the trail end. It was what looked like a broken sign. At first, I thought it might be the trail sign itself, but it was still standing right where it always was. This one looked different. I stepped closer to see what looked like the burnt remains of a sign, almost like one you would see at a campground. All I could see that was still legible on the sign were the words, "Green leaf." The odd sign piqued my interest, and when I looked closer, I saw faded footprints near the burned item. I decided to follow them, unable to resist the new mystery I had discovered. I walked for a while in the direction of the faded footsteps. I almost turned back when I thought I had lost the trail. But dumb luck allowed me to rediscover it, and I pressed on. I reached a small clearing, and as I stepped into it, I felt an odd stillness in the air. The sounds of the animals in the forest and the general ambiance of the whole area seemed to depart. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart beating and the sound of my nervous breath. I pushed on and walked towards a strange shape I saw on the ground near where the trail had terminated. My excitement increased when I saw what looked like a chest, half buried in the ground. For a moment I thought I had found legitimate treasure. I knelt down and reached for the side of the chest. I pulled it free from the loose earth still covering it. After gingerly opening the lid, I looked inside. There were no gold bars, no precious jewels. Only one item was in the ornate chest, a small silver bell. It looked finely crafted, yet not ostentatious. I fixated on the silvery sheen and wondered if it might be valuable. I half imagined the idea of buried pirate treasure, but I had no idea who would have buried a single bell in this chest out in the middle of the woods. I decided to take the small bell, since I could not find any trace of whoever had exhumed the chest and left it there. As I left the clearing and went back to the main trail, the ambiance of the forest had resumed. I thought its absence had been strange, but shrugged it off and pressed on. I considered asking a park ranger about the weird chest in the forest if I ran into one. I hated to admit that I did not wish to, since I wanted to keep my unique prize to myself. The bell was very nice, and its smooth and polished surface was almost mesmerizing. I walked a bit farther, and then I felt a compulsion I had not felt before when I picked it up. I had inspected the fine craftsmanship, but I had not considered just how it might sound until that moment. Upon considering that question, I became fixated on it. It was all I could think about. After a few more steps, I was unable to move on without knowing the answer to the most important question in the world. What does the bell sound like? I held the slim handle between my thumb and index finger, and delicately, almost reverently, shook the bell from side to side. The moment the sound rang out, it became the only sound in the forest. The soft chime felt like it somehow echoed for miles around. I felt an immediate sense of displacement and vertigo. I felt like I might be sick and thought I would collapse. Instead of falling down somehow, I fell up. I whirled through the sky as if launched from a catapult. I remember trying to scream, but my voice was gone. I thought I would fall to the ground when I was plummeting through air high up above the trees in the forest. I discovered that I was not falling and had somehow stabilized in a gentle float high above the canopy of the trees. Somehow, I was flying. I looked around and saw the forest stretching on for miles. I had no idea how I was able to remain up in the sky. All I had done was ring the bell, and then suddenly I was up there. I looked around and saw a vibrant aura of colors emanating off of the forest, and the sky seemed to glow as well. I looked at my hands, and they seemed translucent and glowing with a similar array of impossible shades. After floating in disbelief for a few minutes, I found I was able to move in an almost swimming-like motion. I tried to float back down to the surface and check the trail. Part of me was afraid I had a heart attack or something, and I had died. I thought for a moment that the reason I was floating and transparent was because I was a ghost now. When I descended back to the trail, my heart sank, and my previous suspicion was all but confirmed. I saw myself laying on the ground. I still had the odd bell in my hand, but I was laying on my back in a strange pose. I glided towards my prone form to get a better look. I noticed I had an odd gray-like shade to my body, and the bell seemed to gleam a strange hue that looked otherworldly. I feared the worst and approached my body. To my relief, I saw that it appeared to be breathing still. Whatever was happening, I was still alive. At least my body was. It seemed to be some sort of out-of-body experience. The sense of free-floating displacement was almost alike to descriptions of how mentalists believe they can astral project their wills outside of their physical bodies and into the beyond. The strange experience felt almost exhilarating after I was no longer afraid that I had died. The excitement, however, was short-lived when I saw what happened next. I started to hear soft whispering near the edge of my perception. My vision started to double and the skies seemed to darken. There was a tangible shift in the visible aura energy around me, and I felt a strange sense of dread wash over me. I could not describe it, but something bad felt like it was happening. I felt I had to hide, but I also felt exposed since my body was just laying out in the open. I tried to wake myself up. I tried to float back into my body, but nothing worked. There were disturbing sounds emanating from the gathering shadows near the trees all around my fallen form. I thought if I could hide it might work, yet to my horror, I heard the soft chime of that bell emanating from my very being. The sound seemed to ring out from everywhere and nowhere, despite the physical bell laying unmoving in my rigid grasp down below. I started to get desperate. I tried in vain to slap myself awake and force myself up, but nothing I could do seemed to affect the waking world. Then I tensed up as I felt a new presence. I felt the staring eyes of some unseen force. I imagined hundreds of shadowy onlookers, yet when I looked around, I could see nothing. Yet I knew somehow that I was not alone. Something else was there with me. I felt panic welling in my chest and felt like I would hyperventilate, despite this ethereal form I inhabited not truly drawing breath at all. Suddenly I thought I could see hundreds of red dots emerging from the shadows in my peripheral vision. To make matters worse, the dim light in the forest seemed to fade even further, and when the light died out, the imperceptible beings at the edge of the shadows inched closer to myself, my body, and the bell. I caught a direct glimpse of the horrible eyes of one of the entropic stalkers, and I was paralyzed with fear. It had no true form, just a moving conglomerate of living shadows, charged with that unsettling aura of oppressive darkness that was encroaching upon me even then. The red orbs it had where its eyes should be came more into focus as it inched closer. It looked straight at me for a moment, and then it started to shift and change before my eyes. The amorphous, liquid shadow grew arms, then legs, then a true head. Its colors shifted and changed and took on a dull gray like my fallen body had, when the figure turned back to regard me again after its transformation. I could not believe what I saw. It was me, or at least a copy of me that looked exactly like my prone form that still lay on the forest floor. It looked down at my body, and then back to me. It twitched in a spasmodic and jerky fashion for a few moments. Then it focused directly on me and gave me a truly unnerving and knowing grin. It knelt down over my prone form and slowly extended a hand towards my body. I knew I was out of time. I focused as hard as I could on waking myself up. I willed myself to rise and felt my spirit launched back towards the shadowy doppelganger in my body. It had worked that time, and I lurched up with a scream on the forest floor. I was still clutching the bell, and my other arm raised up defensively against the lurking horrors in the dark. I shuddered when I thought of the shadowy hands of that entity who looked like me. I don't know what might have happened if it had gotten to my body first. There was nothing there now, but as I stood back up, I saw I had another problem. Somehow it was the dead of night now. It felt like it was only a short while in that strange state of ethereal motion, yet it must have been several hours in the waking world. I only had the flashlight on my phone to try and find my way, and I resolved to get out of there as soon as possible. I ran into the second problem at that point. Wherever I was not the state park anymore. I was on a trail, but not the one I was on before. It was not just the dark playing tricks on me. This was a different trail. I tried not to panic at my situation, but it was hard not to. I was lost and alone after an out-of-body experience in an unrecognizable place at night. I was not confident I could navigate out of wherever it was I was stuck. I decided to try and find shelter for the night. I found a small outcropping near what looked like the side of a mountain I did not recognize. I had a half tarp in my backpack I normally used for a mat for impromptu picnics. I used it and some sticks to form a micro-shelter, and I hunkered down and tried to stay warm in the cold forest. Sleep did not come at all, however. After laying still for what felt like an hour, I heard something that terrified me. Or rather, it was what I did not hear again. The sounds of the forest. Even the cold wind blowing through the trees was silent once again. I looked down at the bell near where I was sheltering. It seemed to be vibrating and moving almost on its own. Then I heard the whispering voices again, and to my horror, I saw what looked like the hazy images of eyes looking at me in the quiet blackness of the night. I tried to rise to my feet and scream, but I felt paralyzed by the nightmare image of the formless, shadowy eyes moving towards me again. The whispering voices increased in volume and the sounds were becoming more perceptible. Then I realized in horror that I knew what they were saying. They were calling for me. They were calling my name. I forced myself to rise and break out of the nightmare scene in a blind panic. I started to run before tripping over the small bell. I toppled through the dark and smashed face first into a large tree. As I tried to rise and groaned in pain, I heard the faint sound of the bell still chiming after my foot had inadvertently struck it. The next moment, my spirit was flung outside my body again. Not as high up as before, as I seemed to have slightly more control over my spectral wandering. I saw that even at night things seemed brighter here. Colors contrasted starkly with certain elements in the environment. The thing I saw for sure when looking back towards where I had fallen were the wisps of reddish smoke that no doubt represented my shadow stalkers. My heart sank as I realized they were down there yet again with my empty vessel. I swam back down as fast as I could. Some of the red wisps lingered close to my fallen body. I got closer still and saw the nightmarish form of the red, featureless entities close in on my body in the waking world. 3 of them loomed over my shell and looked back to see me arrive. They smiled in unison and reached down towards me. I tried to scream and willed myself awake again. Once more, I succeeded, and I lurched up, finally vocalizing the frozen scream my ethereal form was unable to utter. It was daylight again. I looked around and saw that I was on the trail. I was originally when I had found the burnt sign. The same trail that led me in pursuit of those mysterious footsteps to this odd little bell. I looked down and saw I was still holding it in my hand. I felt a chill creep up my spine as I swear I heard the whispers again. I ran back to the burnt sign and down the trail that the now faded footsteps had led me down. I found the chest laying in the clearing, and I returned the bell to the chest and closed the lid. I did not have a shovel, but I tried to scoop handfuls of dirt over the chest. After what I had seen, I felt compelled to ensure no one discovered the thing ever again. When the deed was done, I started back to my car. As I trudged on, I considered the strange bell, the out-of-body experience, and the awful night, hiding from the hungry shadows that whispered my name. That horrible face that mimicked mine, and whatever intent it had for my corporeal form. I shuddered and resolved never to return to the park again. I still do not know what any of it really was. I do not know what I really saw 3 weeks ago, but I wish I had not seen it. I wish I had not found it, because whatever I caught a glimpse of in the forest with that otherworldly bell, it is not done with me. I thought I could put the matter behind me, but I realized in subsequent days it would not be that easy. Recently I have begun to hear things, and I fear that just ridding myself of the bell was not enough. Every night since then I hear a faint chiming at the edge of my mind. I hear that sound, the chiming of the bell, slowly growing louder each night. Even though I have not touched the thing since I discarded it back to the earth, the chiming is still with me. The true horror dawns on me when the whispers begin again. I don't know what to do now, but I am afraid. I am afraid that I was not the only one to come back from those woods. The stillness in the air is palpable, and the soft chime makes me feel that familiar sense of displacement. I need to focus. They will be here soon, and I don't know where the sound will carry me next. The basement was cold and damp, the air thick and stale. He stood there towering, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. His features were long and slender, limbs stretched unnaturally. His arms hung low, fingers almost grazing his knees. His legs, thin and bone-like, made him stand at an impossible 12 feet tall. His mouth stretched wide, too wide. An unnatural stretched mouth that revealed nothing but a black void inside. His eyes, deep and hollow, were pits of endless darkness, a void that seemed to pull everything in. I don't remember how it got there or how it even got inside. All I know is I locked it deep in my basement where it couldn't come out. Well, that was until I found the basement door wide open. "Hello," I said, staring into the dark basement that yawned open before me. My voice felt small, swallowed by the shadows below. Fear crawled up my throat, thick and sour like I might throw it up. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking. Then I heard it, soft, rattling noises from the kitchen. Gentle, deliberate, like something was moving in there. Something was in the house with me. I moved deliberately, each step slow and careful, my breath caught in my throat. I watched my surroundings, making no noise as I crept toward the kitchen. And then I saw it. The creature from my basement stood at the sink, its towering frame hunched awkwardly beneath the ceiling. It stared out the window, motionless, its long, slender limbs hanging at its sides. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there, like it belonged. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted for the front door, feet barely touching the ground. I didn't dare look back. I didn't need to. The roar came first, splitting the air like a thunderclap. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was deep, raw and wrong, vibrating through my bones, rattling my teeth. My legs nearly gave out from the sound alone, but fear shoved me forward. I hit the door hard, bursting into the cold night air. My car was just ahead, parked in the driveway. My keys. I needed my keys. My hand dove into my pocket, fingers trembling as I fumbled them out. Behind me, the door exploded open with a splintering crack. Heavy, unnatural footsteps pounded against the ground, fast, too fast. I didn't have to see it to know it was coming. I could feel it closing the distance. I reached the car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. My hands shook so badly the keys slipped from my fingers and hit the floor mat. No, no, no. I grabbed them again, forcing the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, the sound of death. The creature lunged from the doorway, its long, bony limbs propelling it forward in a blur of twisted movement. It was nearly to the car. The engine roared to life. I slammed the gear into reverse, tires squealing as I stomped the gas. The car jolted backward, throwing me against the seat as the creature lunged, just barely missing the hood. Its empty black eyes locked onto mine for a split second, burning into me before I peeled out of the driveway. I didn't stop. My foot stayed pressed to the floor, the car flying down the long, dark street. The night swallowed everything around me, but I didn't care where I was going, as long as it wasn't back there. Days passed. I barely slept, holed up in a cheap hotel on the edge of town. The room smelled like old cigarettes and stale air, but it didn't matter. It had 4 walls and a locked door. Every night I checked the window, just to be sure. That night was no different. I pulled back the curtain, heart already racing before I even looked. The parking lot below was empty, streetlights flickering weakly against the dark. For a second, I let myself believe I was safe. Then I saw it. Beyond the lot, past the stretch of cracked asphalt and the rusted chain-link fence, the woods began, thick, black trees rising like jagged teeth. And there, just at the edge where the trees met the night, it stood. The tall, twisted figure. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It only stared, watching me from the shadows. It found me. In an instant, I yanked the curtains shut, heart slamming against my ribs. My breath came in quick, shaky bursts. I sprinted to the door, peering through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway outside was empty, still and quiet. I didn't know how fast it was. I didn't know how smart it was. But it found me. Hours crawled by. The TV droned on in the background, some late-night sitcom I wasn't paying attention to. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see it again. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate tapping. My head snapped toward the door, dread sinking like a cold weight in my chest. Who the hell could that be? I slid off the bed, feet hitting the floor. Before I reached the door, I heard it. A voice. Hello. I need help. Help me. Help me. I need help. Help me. It didn't sound right. It was flat, robotic, like a bad recording played over and over. No emotion, no urgency. I froze, my throat tightened. "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police," I shouted, voice trembling. The voice didn't stop. "Help me. I need help. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door." It wasn't even yelling, just that same lifeless, droning tone. That was the worst part. The calmness, like it wasn't asking, like it was telling. My hands fumbled for my phone. I dialed 911, fingers shaking so hard I almost hit the wrong numbers. The voice stopped. My stomach twisted. It was like it knew. The operator answered. I explained everything. The voice, the knocking, the thing in the woods. My words tumbled out fast, frantic. "We'll send someone," they said, "but it might take a few hours." A few hours. My heart sank. My hand shook so badly the phone nearly slipped from my ear. I didn't hang up. I didn't move. I just stared at the door, waiting. Out of fear, I asked, Could you just stay on the line until they come? I don't want to be alone." At first, she hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't do that. We have to answer other calls." "Please," I cut in, my voice trembling. "Please, I don't think I'll make it if I'm alone." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then, quietly, she said, "Okay, I'll stay." Relief washed over me, but it didn't chase the fear away. My eyes stayed locked on the door. Her voice was calm, gentle. "My name's Rachel. What's your name?" I swallowed hard. It's James." "All right, James, I'm here with you. You're not alone." My throat tightened. "Thank you. I think it's still out there." "Can you still hear the voice?" she asked softly. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "Number? It stopped when I called you, but the way it sounded..." I paused, shuddering at the memory. It wasn't normal. It was like robotic, repeating itself over and over. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're doing great, James. Just stay with me. The officers are on their way." I nodded again, trying to steady my breathing. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet wasn't a good thing. It felt like the calm before something worse. Rachel's voice came through the phone again, steady but a little more serious. "James, who's chasing you? Can you describe them?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat felt tight, like the words got stuck halfway up. I don't know," I said finally. It wasn't a lie. Not really. "It's tall. Really tall. Its arms are too long. Its mouth..." My voice trailed off. My mind replayed that black void, the hollow eyes. My stomach twisted. "Too long?" Rachel asked gently. "James, are you saying it's someone wearing a mask, or..." "No," I cut in, my voice cracking. "It's not a mask. It's not human." The line went quiet for a moment. I heard her breathe in. "James," she said slowly, carefully. "Are you sure? Could it be someone in a costume, maybe? Sometimes when we're scared, our minds..." "I know what I saw," I snapped, louder than I meant to. My voice echoed off the hotel walls, and I flinched at how desperate I sounded. Rachel didn't react. She stayed calm. "Okay, I believe you. You're doing great, James. Just stay with me, all right? The officers are still on their way." My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. My eyes stayed locked on the door. I couldn't tell her the truth, not all of it. If I said a monster crawled out of my basement and followed me to a hotel, they'd think I lost my mind. Maybe I had. But the thing outside, the voice, it wasn't in my head. It was real, and it wasn't gone. An hour passed in what felt like seconds. The room was still, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong. My pulse thudded in my ears, every breath a battle against the rising panic. Rachel's voice kept me tethered to reality, her calm words a thread I clung to. Then, suddenly, a knock at the door. Knock, knock. I froze. The hairs on my neck stood up. Hello, this is the police. Open the door. This is the police. Open the door. A wave of relief flooded through me. I wasn't alone. Finally, the officers were here. I rushed to the door, heart pounding in my chest. I glanced at my phone to make sure I hadn't missed anything, and there it was. The call still connected, Rachel's voice as steady as ever. James, stay calm. They're on their way. I could hear the muffled voice of the officer outside, repeating the same line. The door was within reach. I grabbed the handle, yanked it open, ready to let in the safety of the police. But there it stood, the creature. It towered, its limbs unnaturally long, bent in sickening angles, its black, empty eyes locked onto mine. The grin that stretched across its face was wide and chilling, too wide. I looked down at my phone in my trembling hands. The screen read, 911. What's your emergency? A smile twisted across the creature's face. It wasn't the officer. It never was. I staggered back, my blood running cold. My stomach dropped into a pit of icy dread, and then it hit me. Rachel never asked for my location. I had never been on the phone with the police. I had been talking to it. God help me. You don't need to know me. All you need to know is, I know something. Something I shouldn't. It's not mine to tell, but I don't think dead girls complain much. I see through her eyes, I feel that same pain. More than a memory, I live in the moments, every second of every day. I have never been religious, but I pray to whatever will listen. I will tell her story. I know I have to. I don't know why, but someone has to hear her story. Just promise you won't leave me. We'll stay together, all right? Yeah, whatever. I promise, she said as she slid her uniform off. I sat waiting, having already changed out of my work clothes the second my shift ended. Working in the theater had some perks, but it was hardly worth smelling like popcorn butter after. Rachel put perfume over the smell, but I showered after every shift. My hair was still damp as proof. Do you need anything before we leave? She asked, pulling clothes out of her bag to change into. Probably, I joked, trying to break my own tension. But it's my house, so if it's that important, I'll notice it on my way out. She laughed, buttoning the last of 4 buttons on her jeans. Then she threw on a tight wringer t-shirt. Previously it had some sort of image, but it had worn away with time, leaving it difficult to make out. I dressed nearly the opposite, with a plaid yellow skirt and matching button-up top. A brown belt, with a gold shining buckle and hoop earring to match. We weren't the type to be friends, really. We shouldn't have been. Work does that, brings different types of people together. Rachel hopped off the edge of my bed, grabbing her bag off my floor. She started out my door, forgetting her keys on my nightstand. Rachel, I laughed, picking up the keys and following her out. You won't make it far without these. She smiled, took the keys, and continued without a word. Her car was parked on the sidewalk in front of my house. I was never good with cars, but I knew for sure it was black. I think it was a Cutlass, but I wouldn't bet on it. She got into the driver's seat, but I didn't want to get in with her. I did, against my better judgment, and then we left. The drive there was odd. Even Main Street had no traffic, leaving it a graveyard of stoplights and fallen leaves. Fog, blocking our view from every direction, growing thicker and thicker the further out of town we went. It should be expected with the carnival, but this felt different. I twiddled my thumbs, pretending as though I had nothing to worry about. You okay? Rachel asked, not taking her attention off the road. She always pointed out my little quirks, usually noticing if I was feeling off. I squeaked, snapping out of whatever trance I was in. I was, obviously, not okay. Rachel glanced over. She looked so calm and relaxed. You sure? You look hella tense. I didn't answer. Cool air flooded in through Rachel's window, letting the smoke off her cigarette float out. Flickering neon lights stopped her before she could push any further. The lights lured us into an open field-turned parking lot, like an anglerfish lures its prey. The old beauty, suffocated by the call of humming engines. The funhouse hung upon the gateway. I fumbled for the door handle, unable to muster up the strength to get it open. Vision fuzzy, heart pounding, and a headache I couldn't seem to shake off. Managing to get the door open, I tumbled out. It was too much. The lights, the laughing, the small, crowded paths. But a calm smile and happy voice were as good of an act as the rest of the circus. I had never snuck out before, let alone to a place so big. I was my parents' ideal child, and I loved it. The way every adult mentioned me as a role model, it kept me going, like a push I needed to function. Without approval, I didn't have much, which I think is why I came here tonight. Rachel grabbed my arm, pulling me towards the ring toss. "Would you be careful?" I begged as she pulled me past a girl, nearly sending her flying. Looking at the girl, she was younger, maybe 10 or 11. She looked odd. There was no other way to describe it. She dressed as though a few years behind style. A pale, multicolored striped shirt and bright blue pants. Fee had a microvision. They stopped making those back in 1981. I know that because Lance can't help but bring it up whenever he can. That is only 3 years ago, though, so it's not too odd she has one. Looking around, everyone looked a few years behind. It was uncanny, but perhaps it was just my wild imagination. Rachel didn't seem to notice. Maybe it was nothing to worry about. Trying to find a good distraction, we played every game in reach. We, of course, won nothing. In the carnival, the house always wins. A blaring announcement shook my attention away from the horse race I had been playing. The show will commence in 10 minutes. 10 minutes, droned the announcer. Stock up on snacks, carnival trinkets, and secure a prime seat. And of course, don't forget to enjoy the show. His tone implied that the enjoyment part was optional, but the snacks and trinkets were not. Rachel again grabbed my wrist, pulling me towards the tent. "Come on, we have to get in before the show starts." My heart was racing, my breath coming in short gasps as I stumbled after her. Sweat, grease, and other smells didn't help my nerves. The air inside the tent was too thick to breathe. Without hesitation, Rachel threw herself towards the stairs, dragging me up behind her. Our feet pounded a rhythm against the weathered boards. I held my breath, begging myself not to feel sick. I failed. Watery vomit splattered against the wooden steps. "Whoa." She let go of my hand, covering her own mouth as if she might as well be sick too. "Are you sure you're all right?" I choked on my words. I wasn't all right. "Yeah," I managed, before continuing up the stairs. It was too late to back out now. We stumbled over feet trying to find open seats, but eventually we found what seemed to be the last two in the tent. As if time itself were waiting for us, the show started. The music swelled, and the crowd erupted into cheers as the lights dimmed like embers in a dying fire pit. A single ray guided the eyes of the crowd toward the center of the ring. Then you saw him, one of the many clowns. He could have passed for ordinary, but he had long lost that privilege. A nice white button-up shirt, offset by his bright red pants and bow tie to match. His proportions were all wrong, like a child's drawing of a person. He had prosthetics. They were wooden, all different shades and types. Like he was made purely by the creator's twisted euphoria for torture. The effect? Like a train wreck you couldn't look away from. "Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the fun house." He cheered, arms waving through the air like a weird vintage cartoon character. His tone was weirder, like a voice box, barely matching his mouth as he spoke. It didn't fit him. It was pitchy, too high, as if he'd sucked all the helium from a balloon. "Here is where your dreams come true. Just wait. You'll see wonders of the world, mysteries never to be answered, and the most incredible tricks performed by our amazing actors. Now give a round of applause for the dancers." He stepped back and the stage darkened, as if he were the light keeping it lit. As if they had been there the whole time, they began their dance, like shining dots in the dark, all emitting a light of their own. Their motions pulled the audience into awe. Dark blue leotards tightly clung to their bodies, black ruffles dancing beneath their skirts, defying gravity, every leap just moments too long. Their ruffled skirts gave the effect of a black swan leaping from water, beautiful dark red ribbons in hand, the shade of long oxidized blood. They spun through hoops so quickly they sparked. Contrast to the world of the carnival, they were angels. After they finished their dance, they seemed to vanish. The ring, now lit up, showed 4 large trapeze ropes and 2 poles on opposite sides, stalking the stage for the next who dared to take its place. The additional lighting showed how large the tent really was. It hadn't appeared this big on the outside, only a few hundred feet. Looking at it now, it had to be at least 1,000 feet around, maybe more. A young woman and man climbed up on opposite platforms. Their eyes locked. They had similar attire to the dancers, but no skirts or ribbons to match. They looked similar, both slim brunette-haired. What I can only guess were siblings. They stood still for a moment, as if waiting for some sort of introduction. Without one, she stepped backwards to get a running start and dove. Her hands slammed against the bar, gripping tight as she swung towards her male counterpart. Time seemed to slow. She looked so focused, so certain. She trusted her every move, and her partner just as much. As she neared him, the lights cut, drenching the world in dim, red darkness. Silence. It's frightening. The world isn't meant to be quiet. Silence is predator stalking prey. It's calm before the storm. Silence is pain in the making. A scream. The kind you hear in nightmares. One that speaks a million words, hopes, and dreams, crushing them all in a second. Without words, you could still hear her plea. Screaming is the one language everyone speaks. The lights snapped back on, but the scream didn't stop. The tent shuddered with the silence of the audience, only the screaming. Looking around, they were gone. Even the male trapeze had vanished, just like everyone else, disappeared to dirt across the floor, and the fear that she might not be alone. Looking ahead, she saw her, crushed by the pressure of her fall, the last moments of terror still frozen in her eyes, limbs twisted in each direction, like a gory, broken compass guiding me nowhere. The dirt beneath her, a damp red, her corpse still screaming, the first normal scream mine. Frozen in place, everything seemed to unfold before me like a movie, and for a moment I prayed I was a part of the narrative. My knees gave way, sending me to the floor, barely leaving me conscious through the fear-induced nausea. It was too sudden, too real. The woman's screaming continued, beyond what her crushed torso should have allowed. Blood gurgled up her throat, slowly muffling her agony. Leaning my shaking body against a chair, I looked towards where the door was. It had vanished, with no trace left behind, as if it had never been there at all. I looked around and saw what I should have known far before. There was no way out. Running down the stairs, I slipped and was reminded of my fear-induced vomit, now covering my yellow skirt. Nearing the bottom of the steps, I stopped. A sound echoed throughout the air, stopping me in my tracks, skittering on the roof. Then I saw it. It tore through the roof of the tent with ease, but no light came in. A dark shade of gray-brown, 50, maybe 60 feet long, wrapping itself around the poles holding the place up. 10 long spider-like limbs stuck randomly to the body, as if added as an afterthought, all shifting as if they had minds of their own. 2 sockets where the eyes should have been, pulling the skin around them in like a black hole. Its smile, grotesque and mangled, the ends wrapped around edges of its head, showing horribly large, sharpened human teeth. Moving faster than my eyes could catch up with, it darted toward me. I dropped back to the floor. Sliding down the stairs, I scratched any available surface of skin. It slammed into the steps above me and crawled down right past me. It couldn't see. I crawled along the seat bottoms, shaking every second I wasn't pressed to the floor. It may not have been able to see me, but it could hear my every breath. After more than an hour of crawling, hiding, holding my breath, and repeating that vicious cycle, I reached a curtain. barely open enough for me to fit through silently. I crawled in, too frightened to breathe. For the fear it might hear me, I ran further inside. Hardly seeing where I was going, I ran in and out of every curtain and opening, praying for an escape. Each direction I tried left me more and more hopeless. After many failed attempts at tearing through the tent and looking behind every crate and rack I could find, I crumbled to the floor. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I hadn't taken the time to realize what really was destined to happen. I was not going to escape. I was stuck here, to rot away or die to that horrible monster outside this curtain. I had so much left to do. I wasn't ready to die. The thoughts hurt, and I pressed my nails into my palm. No one had a way with life like she did, floating through the world as if harm never glanced her way. Now harm did more than glance. It was pricking at her skin, drawing closer and closer. I heard it scurry across the ground outside. It hadn't forgotten I was there. I pressed my nails deeper into my skin, drawing blood. It wasn't good, but it took the pain in my head away, helping me focus my brain on something other than fear I couldn't control. Through my blurred vision, I saw a slightly open crate I was too panicked to notice before. Wiping my eyes, I walked over. Sliding the lid off, I looked inside. Human-sized doll parts, some wooden, others porcelain, like those on the clown from the start of the show. I picked one up to look at, just to see what they were. It was hollow. I slid the arm over my own, putting each finger into the correct slot. A perfect fit. The porcelain was cold on my skin, but the freckles dotted on it seemed to match my own. Each finger was built to bend, carefully crafted as if put together by hand. Moving my arm was comfortable, as if it was made for me. Putting it back, I stepped quietly back towards my spot on the floor. Then I felt it. Something moved from out in the rain. I stepped towards the curtain, making sure to stay out of sight of the thing I knew was out there. I glanced out into the dark, not wanting to see it looking back at me. A dim ray from the torn roof was the only light. In that light were scattered chairs, one of the trapeze poles, now broken, and the door. The same as how it had been before, as if it had never left. Without thought, I ran. My shoes pounded the dirt, echoes following me like bees to flowers. I was so close, close to safety, freedom, to the life I feared I'd lose tonight. Hope struck my heart. What strikes harder than hope? Something sharp. Just seconds away from the door, my stomach dropped. I was jerked back, my limbs crunched together by the grip of that thing. Mustering my last bit of strength, I got one look at it. Him. One. He looked human, more than he had before, almost as if turning more human as he watched me suffer. Then, my soon-to-be lifeless body was gouged into a broken trapeze pole. Slow, steady, dripping. Blood. My breathing labored through my punctured lungs. It hurt, not like you'd imagine. Like swallowing chlorine at the pool, the choking, nausea, all the same. But it wasn't as quick. It lingered, like vinegar on my tongue. "Goodbye, Marilyn," a voice walking towards me. Rachel, my co-worker, classmate, someone I considered my friend. Rachel stared at my dying body, and I realized she had no choice. She was a puppet, doing as she was told. I saw it, the way she bowed her head. She didn't really want this, but I couldn't form the words to convince her otherwise. Marilyn's breathing slowed. Maybe she had been hallucinating, maybe not. But in her last moments, I swear I saw her killer become man. Then her breath grew slower and slower, until it stopped. "Good," the man said, as he lifted her corpse off of the pole. Her limbs drooped as blood coated her skin. "You will remain here until we find him. Do I make myself clear, Rachel?" Her head nodded in compliance, her voice hardly above a whisper. "Of course, Father. My work has been done." He had good plans for her body, stitching her wounds, removing limbs to make place for those same antique toy parts she had seen before, predicting her own demise, her eyes sewn open, dark blue buttons in their place. Marilyn. A name of the past, a life left behind. A new name, but the same old girl. Madame Louiselle, the marionette doll. I don't know who she is, and I don't know why I know her story, but whoever she may be, God have mercy on Marilyn Jury,